In this episode, I'm going to be showing you 3 different applications for the vactubes and how to make them in Portal 2 Hammer. There's timestamps on the screen now if you want to skip to a specific section. The 3 applications I will show are using the vactube decoratively, like seen in much of Chapter 5 in Portal 2, using the vactube as a test element like seen in the cut demo videos, and using the pipe to transport the player like seen towards the end of Chapter 5 in Portal 2. First, I'll be showing you how to use it as a decoration. First we need to create a prop static, then in the model browser we search vactube. We can find plenty of options here. I'm going to be using the vactube 128 straight. Using these models you can make the basic vactube. I also use one of the angled models to demonstrate these don't have to be straight and usually they will look better with some turns. At the start and end of my vactube I place the vacuum entrance model, which we need to make prop dynamic. The main purpose of these are to hide the cubes going through the walls, but they do also add more detail to the vactube, which also helps. You can also use vacuum flanges in place of these models. Sometimes I will use an entrance at the start and a flange at the end. You can also use the vacuum scanner model if you want. That would be a bit more unconventional, however. I'd say you should just do whatever works best for you and your map. I also like to add these vacuum connector models throughout the vactube. I will also have one side of the connector use the skin 1 variant of the vactube, which uses a metal texture instead of glass. I usually use the skin variant near starts and ends to better hide the cube spawning. Once the vactube itself is done, you can create a path track entity. Give it a unique name. I'm calling mine vactube path 1. Then shift drag to copy and paste and create the full path for the cubes to move along. On the last path, add the output on pass, exclamation mark activator, then kill. And on the first path, tick teleport to this path track. Now we need to create the cubes and other props that will fly through the vactube. I'm going to be creating a no draw box to put them in. Create a new entity and make it a prop dynamic. You can find these models just by searching vac. The first one I want is the metal box low res. There are lots of different skins for this, but I prefer to go for the ones where the light is glowing. So this first one I choose skin 1. Next give it a unique name. I'm calling mine vactube junk 1. Next create a brush. I'm making mine 32 by 32 by 32 and make it centered on the cube. Hit Ctrl T to turn it into a brush entity, then turn it into a funk track train. In the flags, make sure no pitch is ticked. The speed you may want can vary. Usually longer pipes better justify faster speeds, while slower speeds might be better for smaller pipes. It's ultimately up to you what speed you go with, but here I'm starting with 600. Set the first stop target to be the first path track entity, then give it a unique name. I'm calling mine vactube train 1. Next, create a new brush, again centered on the cube. I'm making this one a different shape to distinguish from the track train. This time we'll turn this brush into a funk rotating. Give it a unique name. I'm calling mine vactube rot 1. I like to make the rotation speed the same as the speed for the track train, so in this instance I'm making it 600. In flags, tick start on and Y axis. This will make sure it's always rotating in the correct direction. Now you can parent the prop to the funk rotating, and parent the funk rotating to the train. Now create a new entity and make it a point template. I'm giving mine the unique name vactube temp 1. And then set the prop, funk rotating, and track chain to each of the templates, and then I place my template inside the cube. In the point template flags, make sure preserve entity name is not checked. Now to create the other props. We select all the entities we've just made, hit Ctrl C, then in edit we click paste special. This will create a duplicate with all entities with a unique name, and already parented to each other. For the amount of items I want, I'm repeating this 5 times. You can do it less or more depending on what items you want in your vactube. My second cube I'm going to change to skin 3, which is a companion cube variant. My third cube I want to change to skin 5, which is a yellow variant. My fourth I'm changing to a turret box, which is another vacanum prop. This one I'll have to realign slightly so that it remains centered with the brushes, and my fifth I'm changing to a turret prop. Create a new entity and make it a logic case. I'm calling mine vactube LC. Then create another new entity and make it a logic timer. I'm calling mine vactube LT. In the logic case, create a new output on case 1, vactube temp 1 force spawn. Then do the same but with case 2 and vactube temp 2 and repeat for all props. In the logic timer, create an output on timer vactube LC pick random. This will spawn a random prop each time the timer hits 0. In the key values for the timer, set use random to yes, and I'm setting my minimum random interval to 0.4 and maximum to 0.6. If you're using slow speeds, you may want these numbers to be slightly higher and further apart, and if you're using faster speeds, you may want these to be lower and closer together. You can always adjust them if you don't like the frequency that props are spawning, although do keep in mind if you're using lots of vactubes with very high spawn frequencies, this can cause your map to crash due to too many entities, so do be careful with this and always make sure to disable the timer once the player can no longer see the vactube. Anyway, if we load this up in game, it should look like this. If you want it to make a sound, you can use a soundscape, or you can use an ambient generic like this and search the word tube, and you can find these sounds. Select whichever one you want to use and make sure the ambient generic has no flags checked. In game it now sounds like this. There are other ways you can make these sorts of tubes. For example, in main Portal 2 they use animations for the entire path of the pipe, but these animations are specific to those vactube layouts, so unless you want to use those only or spend time making your own animations, the method I showed here will likely be your best option. We're now moving on to vactubes as test elements, as seen in the official demo videos for Portal 2 and also many community made maps. First I'm going to create a new vactube with an opening 192 units above the ground, then it goes round to the other side of the room with another opening. In this example I'll be making both a pull pipe and a push pipe to show you how they're both made. You don't have to use both in your map, you can just use one, although if you're using a pull pipe, make sure the entities get killed after they get sucked up. For the pull pipe, create a new entity and make it a point push. Put it 64 units above the ground, make sure the magnitude is negative so that it pulls. I'm making it negative 40 with a radius of 255. You can tweak these if you find this isn't the strength and distance you want. Make sure the entity points towards the opening of the vactube. In this instance that's just up, or negative 90 on the pitch. In flags, make sure push players is unchecked. Directly beneath the point push on the floor, create a new entity and make it an info placement helper. I'm giving mine a radius of 96 and changing force placement to yes. Make sure the placement helper is rotated to face away from the floor. You can tell from the yellow line coming off of it. In the entrance to the pipe, create a new entity and make it an info particle system. Use the broken tube suck particle and face the particle system away from the vactube. Create a new trigger brush entity, 64 units in width and length, that goes from the floor until the end or a corner in the vactube. Make it a trigger push, set the push direction to the direction of the vactube. In this instance that's just up. I'm making the speed of the push 1400. You can do less if you find this is too much, and make sure physics objects is checked in flags. Continue making trigger pushes until you've finished filling the vactube. Make sure the push direction is always in the direction of the vactube. By the opening of the pipe we can add an ambient generic, such as the keyword tube, and you should find these suction sounds. Pick one of the loops, then in flags make sure everything is unchecked. I'm also going to copy this ambient generic to the other end of the pipe. Now I'm going to create another ambient generic. This one will be inside the opening of the vactube, and this will use the sound tube suction object. Make sure start silent and is not looped are both checked. Give it a unique name. I'm calling mine SuckSFX. Create another trigger brush entity inside the opening of the pipe. Make this a trigger multiple and the output on start touch, SuckSFX, play sound, and in flags uncheck client and check physics object. We've finished the pull pipe, now to make the push. To do this I'm going to shift drag to copy the point push, placement helper and particle system to the other end, where we've already placed the ambient generic and trigger push, which pushes away from the pipe. We changed the magnitude of the point push to be positive 40 and changed the direction to be away from the pipe. In this instance that's just down or 90 on the pitch, then move the particle system 128 units away from the pipe and rotate it so that it faces the pipe. There is a different particle for push pipes, although it's never worked for me, but I find I can just use the pull particle in the opposite direction and that works fine. Make sure the info particle system has start active set to yes, then it should be finished. I've added some turrets to display it in action.
Are you still there?
Do keep in mind that sometimes the vactube might not push a cube, so if you want a scenario like this to work, I solve it by placing a func portal detector where you place your portal that has the output on start touch, name of your cube, then exit disabled state. Now we're done. Now I'm going to make a tube ride. Again, I'm going to be making another vactube for this. This one will again go around the room. Next, create the path tracks to travel along, similar to what we did for the decorative tube. Now you want the first path to start 64 units above the ground, as this is the height of the player. On the first path track, create a new small invisible brush entity. I'm making mine 8x8x8. Make it a func track train, give it a unique name. I'm calling mine camera train. Give it a speed of 400, make first stop target the name of your first path. In flags, check passable and fixed orientation. Create a new entity and make it a point view proxy. Change offset type to ease to camera and make the prox entity the track train we made. Change tilt fraction to 0. In flags, check both freeze player and make player non-solid. Give it a unique name. I'm calling mine camera view proxy. Create a trigger brush entity at the start of the tube ride, make it a trigger once. In outputs, add on start touch, camera train, move to path node, then the name of your last path, with a delay of 0.2 seconds. Then add another output which enables the view proxy. On the last path track, add the output on pass, camera view proxy, teleport player to proxy. Then another output which disables the view proxy with a delay of 0.01 seconds. Add another output which kills the track train with a delay of 0.01 seconds. In game it should work now, but we can still add some bonus effects to it. Create a new entity and make it an NV shake. Give it a unique name. I'm calling mine camera in tube shake. You can tweak these values if you want, but I'm going for an amplitude of 2 with a frequency of 30. Set the duration to be something high enough to cover the entire duration of the tube ride. You can just use any really high number here. I'm using 100. In flags, check global shake and in air. Create a new entity and make it an ambient generic. Give it a unique name. I'm calling mine camera in tube SFX. In flags, flag is check play everywhere and uncheck is not looped. Go to the sound browser and make sure sound type is selected to game sounds. Search the keyword whoosh, pick whoosh, whooshy whoosh. Yes, you heard that right, that's the actual file name. Shift drag to copy the MV Shake and Ambient generic. Give the copies new names. I'm naming mine Camera Land Shake and Camera Land SFX. Set the amplitude of the shake to something much higher. I'm making mine 15 and the frequency 240. Set the duration to 1 second. In the ambient generic, set the sound type back to raw and search for an appropriate landing sound. I'm using this land sound for a metal surface. In flags, make sure everything is checked. In the trigger once, add a new output to the in-tube SFX to play sound, and another output to the shake to start shake. In the end path, add outputs to stop the sound and stop the shake, add outputs to play the land sound, and an output to start the land shake with a delay of 0.01 seconds. I'll also be adding the particle and sucking sound effect from the tube made in the previous section. As a final touch, for if the player has a portal gun, create a new entity and make it a point client command. Give it a unique name, I'm calling mine CMD. On the trigger once, add the output on start touch, CMD, command, with a parameter of impulse 200. If you're adding this, you also have to add a 0.02 second delay to the enable view proxy output. In the end path track, add the same output to the client command, but this time using on pass and a delay of 0.02 seconds. Load it up and it should all work. So we're done. In the description I'll leave a few other resources on these topics if you need them. If you're confused by anything, you can ask me in the comments, and if there are any other topics you want me to cover in tutorials, feel free to leave a suggestion in the comments. I don't normally ask this, but if you found this video helpful, a subscribe would be greatly appreciated. See ya.